work that we do. I see that Gabe, our executive director, is on the line. Hey, Gabe. I see that Bobby White from IH is also here on the call, which is really exciting. We have a ton to cover in a short amount of time. And so I really quickly want to thank a number of IH colleagues who have helped behind the scenes to make today's event possible. So I'm going to run through their names, and I guess some of these names will be familiar people that you know, or maybe you've seen names on emails, and so now you'll see faces and connect faces to names. Brooklyn Rue, Ferus Abu Ghazaleh, Zerlene Thompson, Tia Williams, Matt Meacham, and Bobby White. So thank you guys, all of you, for helping to make this this event possible. And also huge thanks to the Builders Initiative. And I think that their support helped make our Foreground Rural Initiative possible, but also today's capacity building session. So again, we have a lot to cover, a short amount of time. There's going to be plenty of time for people's input, participation, questions and comments later. I know that's baked into the program that that Jen and Anna have devised for us. And then at the end if we have time, at the very end, we're going to include a few updates from Illinois Humanities, from our grants programs, other programs, etc. I know there are still people joining, but we need to keep this show rolling. So without any further ado, I'm going to go ahead and introduce our speakers, and we will jump right into the program. So we have two speakers who are leading this session on data or data. There's kind of a little bit of a debate about which is said. First of all, Anna Marín goes by she, Aya. Anna is an independent consultant and community advocate and co-creator at Become. She works with nonprofits in evaluation, strategic planning, research, and community outreach. Anna has done community organizing and change making in the Chicago area, Southern California, Texas, and Brazil. As a leader in her community, she worked to raise the issue of police racial profiling, served as a campaign strategist for a slate of progressive aldermanic candidates, dispersed COVID aid to neighbors, and served as the co-chair of the United Way of Metro Chicago Neighborhood Network in Cicero, the Cicero Community Collaborative. She's bilingual, English, Spanish, and has professional fluency in Portuguese. Anna is an outdoor enthusiast and brings her two children with her into the forest as much as possible, even when they groan about it. Secondly, we have Jenn Yoo, who goes by she, they. Jen was most recently the senior manager at Program Evaluation and Impact at Illinois Humanities, where she worked on analysis and evaluation across all programs and grants areas. Jen has experience using data and maps to better understand and increase opportunities for education-related audiences and develop internal and external strategies at various organizations. He also serves as a grant reader across humanities and arts organizations. Previous experience includes working for the Chicago Architecture Center, the School of the Institute of Chicago, the NEH, that's the National Endowment for the Humanities, and others. Before moving to Chicago, Jen taught art and math for kindergarten through college-age students outside of school settings, and supported education through strategic planning and curriculum development. So if we were in person, we might ask for a loud round of applause. I guess if everyone's muted, that's kind of a mute point. But now we're going to hand things over to Anna and Jen. And thanks in advance for leading this.
I think you're up first, Jen.
Yeah, and we have a wonderful presentation created. So Anna will be sharing that. And as she pulls that up, I also just want to echo what Mark said and just say we're so excited to see you all here. And I hope that there are some great takeaways that you get from me and Anna today. And as Mark mentioned, today's capacity building workshop will be 2 hours, and it's going to be interactive. So please feel free to use the chat function. And if you have any questions, there's a lot of wonderful Illinois Humanities staff here to help you. So feel free to message them. So if you go to the next slide, we'll see the quick agenda. As Mark said, it's pretty jam-packed. We wanted to fit as much as we can in here. And also there will be, this will be shared with you post workshop, whether that's the slides or the recording, as well as a post-event survey that's going to be at the end of this workshop. So feel free to stick around. And if you missed the survey for any reason, it will be sent through email. So you'll have a chance to submit through that too. And then in the next slide is there's 4 goals today. So just to do a quick recap, the first goal is to assess your current data capacity. The second is to do an overview of all things data for your organization, and then to create hands-on opportunities through breakout groups, and then to generate collective best practices. So as we go through this, as Mark mentioned, there will be opportunities for Q&A, so please reserve your questions. If not, you can pop it in the chat so that we don't lose them throughout the process. So to get us started and to really go in with the whole, this is an interactive process, we have a quick poll for you. This is really about today, so feel free to be honest. It is recorded, but we won't hold it against you. Today, we're going to do a quick hands poll as a way to tell, or way to gauge how you're feeling. So if you're excited, do a thumbs up. If you feel indifferent about data today, do like a, so-so. And then if you feel nauseated with data, you can do a thumbs down. So Anna will stop sharing the screen. Yeah, as Allison demonstrated, you can also pop it in the chat. We're getting some thumbs ups. It's okay if you're honest. Like today, I'm a little nervous about doing this workshop, so I will say I'm indifferent. We're getting a lot of thumbs up, which makes me feel much better about this workshop, so thank you. Yeah, so this is one of many ways to gather data. It can be as quick as a hand gesture. So this is a really great way to make sure people are feeling engaged. They are, we're not having any audio issues because people are responding. People are able to see the functionalities and the settings of Zoom. So this is a great way to get us started. Okay, feel free to continue to put those in the chat and share it with your reactions, and we'll move forward. So for the next slide, this is just a recap of the questionnaire you filled out. And so for the next 20 minutes, we'll show some findings from the survey that you filled out. So thank you so much for filling those out. And for those who continue to fill it out, I just want to mention that the next few slides will be based on the 27 submissions that came in before the end of the week last week. So if you're not represented, we still received your survey. It's just we needed some time to create the slides. And so as we go through this, we also want you to reflect on 4 questions, and I'll end each slide by asking one of these 4 questions for us to respond to in the chat, or you can unmute yourself. So they include, why do you think we collected this data? What is the importance of the findings? Why were the questions formed the way they were? And why were these data visualizations chosen? And Anna will continue to put this in the chat as well, as demonstrated, so that you won't lose access to these questions. So to get us started, we'll look at the next slide. So the first question we asked was for you to enter your zip code. And so using that data of the 27 entries that came through, we have 14 of the 102 counties represented in this room. And on the right, you'll see each dot representing a response, and it's overlaying on the 102 counties borders. And so this is just a quick way to visualize your responses, but I also wanted to ask, why do you think we collected this data? And I know based on your responses to the qualitative that we'll discuss later, that a lot of you receive audience and attendee demographics information and zip code geographic information. So why do you ask those questions? And so if you could quickly respond to why you do that, or, if you still feel like you're settling in, then Anna and I can quickly explain why we asked the question and why we asked IH to ask the question. So I'm going to wait 3 more seconds to see if anybody responds in the chat. Why do you think we asked this question? Okay, so the reason why we asked this, oh, perfect. Oh, there we go. We're getting a flood of them, which is amazing. So yeah, to see access and engagement, to better understand the groups of people we are serving in our community for demographic purposes, to see reach and identify places not as connected. So I think a lot of these are really important reasons. To know your audience is one that just came in. We like to know where our visitors are coming from. So yeah, to everyone's point, this is a really great way to visualize and understand where your audience is coming from. And, you know, some of you guys mentioned, well, how it's important to see where you're reaching, because that will also then inform where you're not reaching, which is also a very important point. So for instance, for this workshop, you see the 14 counties, but I can't do math, but 102 minus 14 are not reached, but that doesn't mean Illinois Humanities doesn't do work, like, doesn't have interactions with them. This is just the representation of who's in the room today. So that was really helpful. And then the next slide, this goes into the deeper questions. So I also just want to say that the following charts that you'll see were created using Google or Microsoft Office. And we wanted to make sure we do that because this means any of you who have access to Google Suite or Microsoft Suite or Microsoft Office can create these same exact ones. We also used Illinois Humanities branding colors, which means you can also make them look fancy by using your branding colors. As part of the resources, we also have like a color key website. So if you're like, we don't have any colors, but we worry about access to visually impaired, there is a website that we'll share later that can help you through all of that, which is also free. So all of this, as you see, you too can do it. So that's going to be great, I hope. So this question, basically, for the next question we asked, as an individual, how familiar are you with data practices? The 27 of you who responded, of them, or of you guys, 3 chose other. And just to quickly represent the 3, I'm going to read those to say 1, it remains to be seen, 2, between a superhero and psychic, and 3, familiar with traditional practices, but would like to learn if newer practices are relevant to our organization. So they may not fall under those categories, but they're still just as important. So I want to make sure they're represented even though they're not on the list. So using this response, we were able to tell that around 3/4 of you guys said that you have some experience with data practices or feel like a novice. And this information really helped me and Anna shape the presentation so that we know not to start with, how do we define data? Because most of you are familiar with this work. And so now we can go deeper in and talk about how to apply data and how to use data to better your organization. So now that we kind of got the practice in of using the chat to answer one of those reflection questions, I want to ask, now that we're looking at this, why do you think this question was formed this way? For instance, why was it multiple choice? Why did we use fun terminology? So feel free to use the chat to answer some of these questions of why do you think we use this question format to ask for your individual knowledge? And I'm motivated by the previous time where the questions were flooded afterwards. I'm gonna, yes, okay, to keep it interesting and engaging, yes, good point. So we really wanted to use the superhero, psychic, and understudy to help keep it interesting. Because it's the first question, we want you to keep going and answer the questions. For accessibility, yes. Data isn't considered fun usually, so keeping it simple and colorful is a good idea. Thank you, Mary. That was definitely the intention. I think it was a breakdown experience with data and help people understand where they are. Yes, multiple choice because there is not a standard terminology for data knowledge. Exactly. And if we do go into like the details, it might become 12, 20 responses. And, you know, really what Anna and I were hoping for was to just gauge people's levels rather than it's like knowing whether you guys know the exact terminology of data, because that's not why we're here. So thank you. And the next slide will look pretty similar, but this one uses percent. There's a couple of changes here and there because this one's about organizational capacity. So for this question, for the next 2 questions, we asked about your organization's familiarity with data and how you use it. And I'm gonna slow down a bit, so sorry if I'm speaking too fast. Please feel free to tell me to slow down if needed. Use the like a chart because feelings are not number drivers. Yes, thank you, Jan, for noticing that and acknowledging that. So here we asked about your organizational capacity, and there were 2 of you who chose other. And again, like the previous one, I'm just going to read them aloud so that it's still represented in the data collection. So one is, we do not have anyone trained to collect data. And another one is, not sure how this would affect me. So they don't have any organizational capacity at all. So the majority of the respondents, based on this, said that you collect some data that you need as an organization, and you see in the pie chart that it's about 67% of you who said this. And then, so I didn't want to explain too much of this because we just did the walkthrough with the first question, but to bring up the reflection question of, based on how we just described the previous question, what is the importance of the finding of this question? And why did Anna and I include this question to help inform the presentation? So I see Anna included the questions again, so feel free to review those. And include in the chat why you think we included this question and what was important in the findings. To know what participants need. Yes. So Anna and I could create a generic, broad data presentation, but a lot of times I think when those are also really great presentations. I'm not saying that they're not. However, Anna and I wanted to make sure that this is a personalized experience for some of you and for most of you. And so we asked some of these questions to understand where some of the organizations, where you guys are in terms of capacity. Also because as a statewide program, people probably have varying degrees of capacity. Some of you in the fill-in mentioned how you have a desire, but not the people or the time. And so what does that look like and what does that mean for your organization? So capacity can mean a lot of things. Okay, great. So now for the next 3 slides, we're going to look at 2 different questions. So this next question was a follow-up to the previous slide about organizational capacity. So this one goes beyond it, and we asked regarding current practices, and we saw the following responses, as you see. There was one other, and it was because they're a radio station and they can't determine how many listeners they have. So they kind of don't fall under the 4 options that we had given out. One thing we want to say is that we chose a bar chart and formatted it this way to represent from most to least familiar with current practices, and what current practices are being used instead of height order, because I think even bar charts, there's so many different ways to organize it depending on what you're trying to prove or what you're trying to show. So for us, our goal wasn't to identify the majority of where you guys are, it's to identify the trend and the distribution, and that's why we kept it in this order. So with that said, I'm going to do this 3 more times, I promise, and no more than that. Why do you think we collected this data? To help it, like, why do you think we collected this and how does it inform the presentation? And I'm going to ask you to put it in the chat, because you guys have all been wonderful in using the chat to answer these questions. So I look to you all. Again, these were all created in Excel spreadsheets. And, you know, if you ever want to know how to do it, there are really quick, Microsoft has official tutorials, but there's also quick, like free YouTube tutorials that show you how to even include, like, you know, the 7, 6, 10, how to include those, and they can be updated to percentage. So, you know, if you're ever curious on like how to create this, you can email us, but also you can probably find really good resources through YouTube and other places. Okay, so determine our needs to help us move forward with our nonprofit mission, to find out if the group needs based knowledge before starting? Yes. To get a better idea of the breadth of our experience, to better frame the conversation, getting a baseline of our experience with data. Yes. So this helped us realize a lot of you guys collect data, maybe not to the level you want to, but you have a lot of familiarity with collecting it to begin with. So as I wrap up my section with one more question, Anna will then go into how to apply the data that you're collecting, and the various ways of applying data. So hopefully that can really target the people who answered the occasionally and collected no idea how to use it. So for the next slide, the next two slides answer the final question we asked. This was a qualitative question, so there's a little bit more visualization and data that we wanted to represent. This may look chaotic, but I promise you there's reason to it. So the last question we asked was, what is your reason for attending this workshop and what do you hope to get out of it? So it was a two-pronged question. And there were some really wonderful responses, some that we've already alluded to, but we went through each and every single one and identified common themes. Then we cross-referenced those themes and responses to identify which categories were the most common, which is how we came up with the 5 that you see on the left side. But one of the reasons why, and a lot of you guys alluded to this in the responses here, one of the reasons why it's important to continue researching and staying up to date with common practices is to help inform your decision-making when identifying common themes and anomalies. So for instance, even though only one person used the term integrity in their response, this is included in the other section because this is an area of interest and priority among a lot of evaluators, especially in the nonprofit world. And so it's represented here. And among the identified themes, a lot of you consider these of the same importance. And so that's why they're kind of like circles and not like a hierarchy chart. So for instance, 12 of you wanted to know about better knowledge around collecting data. And then 11 of you wanted to know, new and best practices that are applicable for your organization. 9 of you wanted to know how to interpret data, and that can mean improving your organization or understanding audience better, etc. So this was a quantitative way of visualizing the qualitative, but it's always important to balance quantitative and qualitative, especially when looking at qualitative or fill-in responses. And so the next slide, you'll see some common or some of the key phrases pulled out from the answers or from the responses. And please note that some of these responses are paraphrased to remove any personal identifiers. I'm sure some of you have been reached out in the past from Illinois Humanities to say, hey, we want to quote you, do we have your permission? So, for along the same thinking process as integrity, it's really important to ask for permission or remove any personal identifiers so that no one's words are used without their permission or not acknowledgement. So looking at these, there's 6 here. Nope, there's 7 here. So, and each one has like a little bit of bold to help to kind of showcase how we identify the themes of them within each of the responses. So for instance, build on my current knowledge and firm up my current practices with data collection, the importance of like the current there and being up to date, what data sets are most valuable, interpreting their meaning and creating actionable strategies for growth. That may not have been that wording is so important and to consider and keep in mind. And although we kind of diluted it for the first section to identify themes, these are some of the key words that we want to make sure we don't lose as you move forward with looking at your organizational data. So and this is the last time I will ask these reflection questions. So thank you so much for using the chat and continuing to use the chat. But for this one, I wanted to ask, why do you think we chose these data visualizations for this specific question? So that includes this slide of the 7 direct quotes, and then the previous bubble slide of the themes that were identified in the qualitative responses. So I know a lot of you all in your organization, based on your responses and based on previous work I've done with you, that you also ask your audience a lot of these qualitative questions. So, you know, this same question can be applied to how do you guys use any quotes that you get, and why is it important that you have access to these quotes as organizations, as individuals who are trying to improve the programs that you bring to your communities. To capture individual concerns and that seem particularly important. Yes. Thank you, Claire, because yeah, as mentioned, the first slide kind of does these like umbrella terminologies. And so the second slide really brings breadth and foundation to some of the themes that we identified. To summarize the questions in an easy to understand but personal way. The quotes are easily understood and personalized. Yes, it tells a story. Yeah, so a lot of you also do impact. I see Anna's reaction and we're so excited. We wanted to make sure you are because you guys are all experts. I know some of you said you're feeling indifferent or nauseated, but you are the experts. You're here, you're learning. And we want, like, you guys are the ones providing the reasonings and understanding all of this. So I hope that really gives you confidence to continue doing the wonderful work you're doing. And now I'm going to pass the baton to Anna to talk about kind of like the technical and the actual approaches of, now that I've blurted a lot of words and reviewed the surveys with you, you know, Anna can bring some structure to all of that. So, and if you have any questions, we will have a Q&A after, so feel free to either put them in the chat or save it for later. But Anna, it's all yours now.
Thank you. It was so fun going over your data. We wanted to make sure that you saw some of yourself in this presentation first and had a visual representation of all the answers you gave. So I'm going to do a little bit of nuts and bolts now. And I want to say I have my own data journey. I started, at least in my nonprofit lifetime, just doing a lot of community engagement, and we had something called community organizing numbers. So we'd like put on an event and ballpark figures. Oh, well, we think there was such and such number of people here. And then maybe the newspaper would come out with another number and we'd have to like round and report these back to our funders. And you know what? That's one way to do it. But as I became more embedded in my own evaluation practices, I really began to understand the importance of really good data and data practices and all the amazing different ways that you can collect data and all the different ways you can use it and how to tell that story. So this section, I'm going to talk about 3 different pieces. We're going to start with data collection. Then we'll move into the usage of data and then talk briefly about the importance of data. However, when you are going to embark on your next data mini journey, the order of those should probably be reversed. So the first question is, why do you even want this data? Because you're going to have to ask people to engage with some sort of collection, and that takes time and resources, on your part as well to come up with the tools and all this kind of stuff. So why do you want it in the first place? How are you going to use it? And then you want to build your collection practices to meet the usage and the importance. So keep that in mind as we think through this. So the first part we're going to talk about, is collection. So I remember when I first started hearing mixed methods, I'm like, I have no idea what that means. Well, it's not that complicated, come to find out. Mixed methods merely means that you're using both quantitative and qualitative data. So quantitative is numbers, right? It's your demographic information, your participation numbers, some basic satisfaction, dissatisfaction information. And qualitative is when you're asked more long form questions and when you can start to pick out the themes like what Jen was talking about. So when you use both of those at the same time, you are doing mixed methods data evaluation. So boom, you're probably already doing it. Hopefully it's a little bit more demystified. So in terms of data collection, we're going to talk about 5 different ways. You are probably using surveys and questionnaires already. That's an easy way to put, an easy tool to put together, and you get some basic information from your folks. And some of you might be using other data sources where you're, I think, feel like someone mentioned the census, you're going into already collected previously collected data from another institution, and you're overlaying it with your own data and making conclusions about those. But some other things that you can do are observations where you have a, we'll talk about this a little bit, you have a specific questions that you are looking for. You're not just observing kind of blindly. You can do interviews and get confidential, more individualized information in an interview, and then you do focus groups. Some of you might have participated in a focus group at Illinois Humanities, where you have a group of people, but each focus group has its own personality. So people react amongst each other in a focus group. But these are all really good ways that you can incorporate different kinds of data collection other than doing the kinds of surveys that you did at the start. We'll do at the end. And I do not give you permission to leave before you finish the survey. So Jen has other rules, but please stay for the exit survey. So in terms of surveys and questionnaires, so the best way to do this is to administer, if it's a post survey, you want to administer right away. The longer the time frame between whatever event it is and the administering the survey, the less people will participate in it. You want to aim for no more than 10 questions. You want to vary your question styles. So someone mentioned a Likert scale. So that's when you ask how much you liked something, how much you agree with something, very much in gradations to I hated it or I completely disagree. So that pointed scale is called a Likert scale. In terms of long form questions, you really only want one or two of those because people will opt out of those questions. And this is really the best and only way to collect demographic information. So race and ethnicity, gender, age, income level, zip code, whatever the things that you want to collect that help you understand who your audience is. We will get to that in a second about why a survey is most important. Another method is an observation. So whenever you are doing data collection, you want to develop what's called a protocol. So it's the survey questions, it's the interview questions. For an observation, it's specific points that you are looking for, and so that you can capture data consistently across all the people that you are observing. And you want to make sure that if you are you have a group of people who are observing, say, at a public event, that everyone is trained on what they're looking for. They understand the questions and they're not making judgments about what they're seeing. They're just really observing. If anyone wants to go down that rabbit hole, there's a whole body of ethnographic research practices about observations that point to writing down what you see, not writing down what you are interpreting or what you think those things mean. So there are coaching sessions offered at the end of this. If you want to go deep into observational protocols, we can do that. And this is absolutely the worst way to collect demographic information. You cannot look at someone and decide who they are demographically. For interviews, again, you want to develop an interview protocol, a specific set of questions that you're asking to every person that you are interviewing so that you can cross-reference and create themes across the interviews to draw out the same kinds of data that you want to see throughout your whole process of interviewing. The best interviews are done with someone who is more neutral. However, you might not have the capacity to do that, and that's okay. And you certainly want someone who is familiar with the organization and the purposes of the interview. With an interview specifically, it's okay to kind of veer off and wind around because someone might give you a really good nugget of information and you want to follow that path. And this is a place where you want to guarantee anonymity if that is something that you want to do. So Jen mentioned that some of you have been asked to have a quote shared. So you want a great way to get candid information to say, everything said here, it will be kept confidential. Your name will be removed from everything you say. And if we do want to use a direct quote, we will go back and ask for your permission. So that's standard information, standard kind of opening to any interview. Especially with interviews now being recorded so much of our work is done over virtual places, and that where you can have a recording, which gets great transcripts. However, people worry about, the audio or the video being released. So really make sure you're guaranteeing that anonymity. Focus groups is similar, right? Instead of having one person, you have a group of maybe 3, 5 people. I would say for a focus group, 5 is the best number, because then you'll have room for everyone to speak without worrying about people not having enough time to say. And you don't want to have, I have 3 to 5 questions, sorry. You don't want to have more than 3 to 5 questions, because then some people may wax on for a little while, and so you want to make sure you have a good number of questions, so you're allowing everyone to have the chance. It is good at the beginning of a focus group to set the kind of community agreements, right? We want to make sure everyone has time to speak. Everyone has 3 minutes, say, to answer a certain question. If you feel like it's necessary, you can put a timer on, and that way your phone or whatever technology you're using goes off, and whoop, well, that's time up. It's totally neutral. It's not you, being the bad person in the room. And you want to make sure that you talk to every single person in the focus group, because there will be people who speak up a lot, and there will be people who don't speak up as much, and you want to make sure that there is space to allow everyone to have a chance to respond, including saying, I don't want to answer this question. And like I mentioned, focus groups have personalities. So if you're being conscientious about putting people together, you might want to think about, how do certain people interact? Do they have the same knowledge? Do you want people with different kinds of knowledge in the focus group? Just to think that through. If that doesn't work out that way, that's okay too. Okay. And another great source is the data that other people have collected. So there is so much information out there, so much. And it's available for free. You can search it, and we should all be using it, right? So some basic data that's out there. The census has a ton of information, a lot about demographics. But it is searchable by their census block. Go right to the website, and it's all right there for public consumption. The state of Illinois has a data portal. The Secretary of State has a data portal. The Labor Department, your universities have data portals. Some historical societies and museums might have publicly available data. Certainly your county health departments and other county departments. There is Google Maps has a way to, I'm not a expert at mapping, but Google Maps has programs available where you can overlay different mapping. I'm doing another project and found out that the United Nations has a whole freely available data portal. I mean, you do not have to collect all the data. About your specific audience, probably. But if you want to understand your audience in relation to the county, in relation to the state, all this stuff is available for you to go and dive in and see what you can find out. Okay, so returning to the idea of the collecting of demographics. The only way to collect demographic information is to ask people how they identify. So we can't look at someone or listen to someone and make judgments about who they are, their race or ethnicity, their gender, their place of origin. If you're looking at, income levels, we can't look at someone and make those kinds of judgments. The only way to find out demographic information is to ask someone individually, and you do that through a survey. And if someone says, I'm this, and you say, I don't know about that, it's not for us to make, right? Each person gets to identify themselves how they identify themselves in the categories that you provide based on whatever demographic information you collect. At the end of this session, you will take the exit survey, and there are demographic questions on there. They're the typical demographic questions that Illinois Humanities asks, so you'll probably have seen a survey like this before. And for you, you might want to know more about income level, about geographic isolation. There's many questions you can ask. And the census can maybe help you decide what demographics you want to ask, or you can look at your county health department and see what demographics they ask. So there are other sources as well to help you determine, what should you be asking anyway. But you have to ask somebody individually. We cannot do that in any other way. Okay, so now for usage, and I'm sorry, this is fast. You will have access to this afterwards, and you can always reach out and ask questions. So again, surveys and questionnaires are best used for demographic information and to get quick responses. So you saw that we had a survey out to you. It was general information, right, about how you feel about data and your general usage. Observations are to understand how people interact with events potentially. Interviews and focus groups are about understanding more individualized data. And then your other data sources, obviously you have to define your parameters when you look at those sources and then overlay them to the data that you're collecting yourself. So surveys and questionnaires. How do you use it? Why are we even collecting this in the first place? Some of you answered this already with the zip code question. It helps you understand who your audiences are. It also helps you understand who you're not reaching. So I remember interacting with an organization at Illinois Humanities. I don't know if you're in this room. So there is a new community of color that has moved into their region. This is somewhere not around Chicago, and they were not reaching them. And so they don't think they were reaching them, but maybe they are. And so by having a survey question, asking the questions that you want to determine can help you figure out if you're reaching a new audience. One thing to think about is also language access, right? So if you're reaching new populations, you have to think about what are the primary languages used by maybe a new community or an unreached community, maybe a deeply embedded community, but that English is not their primary language. And so how do you adjust your surveys to make sure you're reaching all the populations? Surveys can be used pre and post event, as you have seen in this workshop, to gauge understanding, engagement, applicability, a whole series of questions that you have already been subjected to and that you will be subjected to. And observations and surveys are a really powerful tool. So with an observation, you would go to the event and have a series of questions that you would look for, and then you would ask people a follow-up survey to have both of those data sets overlaid. And it can be very powerful to understand your audience engagement. For interviews and focus groups, really hones in on getting at very particular pieces. So it can be used in planning. You are a new organization. You have no idea what you want to do. So you need to talk to your community about what are the issues that you worry about. Where is the need? Where are the gaps? And a survey might get at a little bit of that, but long form conversations is a way to dig deeper into curiosities, fears, pieces that you're just not going to get when you do a quick overlay survey. And focus groups are just a faster way to get to it. You might not get quite as in depth, but you can get more people at once. You can also use it afterwards in reflection to really understand what was the impact of a project on your community members, on your partners. I do want to say that interviews and focus groups generate a lot of data that must be analyzed thematically. So you saw those quotes. I realize I'm need to race to the end of this. You saw those quotes that Jen did where she bolded some pieces. That is analyzing the themes that that we're seeing across different responses. So you will have to go through and slog through all that data. And if interviews and focus groups can be very powerful to get deep understanding about something in your community and the needs that need to be met. And then other data sources, right? Overlay your own demographic information, understand your participation numbers in relation to other groups and organizations that are near you or that have a similar mission to you. You can also look at qualitative sources, like go to other organizations' websites, see what they're doing, what language are you using? If you're new to something, how do other people talk about a particular subject? And you can look at trusted sources to go deeper. Okay, and finally, importance. Why the heck do we use this anyway? So 2 primary audiences. You have internal audiences and you have external audiences. So your internal audiences, again, who are your people? What are the demographics? What are the preferences? What are the needs of the people that you are directly serving? It's a great way to talk about your work to your primary stakeholders. So how do you talk to your direct partners about the work? How do you talk to new partners about your work? How do you engage new people as volunteers or staff members? You should be able to brag about your work to the people who are deeply engaged in your organization, because you all do amazing work, which is why you're in this room in the first place. External audiences are critically important in order for the sustainability of your organization. So some of you are going to look at a very simple annual report that is probably being used in many ways. It's being used in partnerships. It's probably being used to solicit new funders. And it can be a really simple 2 pages. It doesn't have to be like a whole dissertation on the amazing work that you are doing, and think about how you are attracting external audiences, new partnerships, the businesses in your community, going to talk to your local university, all the different ways that you can think about expressing the work externally to the people that you want to get engaged, especially in generating funds for the sustainability of your organization. Whew. Okay, I'm done talking. 2 minutes over. So I'd like to open this up for you all to ask questions. There was a lot of information. And Jen and I are both available to help work through any questions that you have or clarifications. You can drop them in the chat or speak loudly. Jen, we were so clear and so concise. Thanks, Mary. Does anyone think they'll use a new tool? One thing that we will do after this is send out a list of data sources, and Jen mentioned Google and some of the other tools you can use. So we'll make sure there's a follow-up email that goes out that lists some of those resources. Yeah, and Heather, from the radio station, it can be really hard to gather who your participants are. And so thinking about focus group participation to get some of that information might be the best way to go.
Well, let's say that we want to begin using a focus group to better understand how we are serving our communities. Is that something you recommend being facilitated by someone on staff, or having external but knowledgeable folks moderate and kind of facilitate?
Yeah. It's best if you use someone external if you have them, so that people don't feel like they're answering to the director, say, or someone who's intimately engaged and is hoping for certain information. So if you have a neutral person that knows you but is not directly associated, that can act as a kind of a neutral person, and the focus group participants won't necessarily being interpreting, doing the interpretation of the data in the focus group. That would be best.
When you say doing the interpretation of the data in the focus group, you're saying like, it'd be great if you could have an external person like run the focus group, gather the data, and then package and present the data to staff members?
Yeah, I mean, ideally now with technology, if you can do a focus group via Zoom and
Mhm.
collect it, and then the transcript is there, that is the best way. You have to get through the technology. Or ask, I think people are so used to being recorded now that you can now ask, even if it's in person, maybe put a recorder in the middle. And there are transcript programs, they are paid transcripts programs as far as I know, but that you can upload a recording and they will spit out a transcript. They're not that expensive. I think it's, I don't know, 20 cents a minute or something. So depending on how long your focus group is or your interview. But that is the best way.
And what are some of those programs that you recommend using?
We will send those out. I know of one, but we will definitely send those out. So I'm gonna write myself a note.
Great, thank you.
Yeah. And Jen, if you see any that you want to jump into.
Yeah, so Zerlene asked, do you have any recommendations on which data surveys to use if your organization is too small or too large? I think typically there's no like a follow steps A, B, and C to get it. But I think there is like as Anna mentioned, there are certain types of questions and numbers of questions to make it be more accessible and engaging to the audience. And so I think one of the biggest things is identifying, whenever you do data surveys, identifying what are some of the learnings that you want out of it, and then kind of going from there to condense some of the questions that you're asking. And I think one thing to keep in mind is one survey can't provide all of the data that you're looking for. And so keeping that in mind, that when you're creating a survey, not to jam pack it. So because one of the things that might lead to is no response at all if somebody is overwhelmed, or if only one part of the survey is applicable to a respondent or whatnot. So, you know, and as Anna mentioned, we'll include some of the resources in the end, and the PDF of the slides. And so you'll see some of the parameters that Anna mentioned to help shape the data survey. But yeah, I think that's just one thing to keep in mind, that as you create surveys, yeah, starting from the goals and then doing it kind of backwards, so that you're not asking questions that, you know, the responses will just sit there, or you're not missing any questions that actually you know, want to include in your annual report or whatnot. Are there, wait, Katie asks, are there standard survey questions that funders like to see available to support grant applications? I want to see if Anna or Mark have responses to this one.
Yeah, this is Mark. I can take a shot at that. I mean, I think on the most kind of basic level, I think any data collection at all at all about your programs is helpful. And what I mean by that is you'd be surprised how many grant applications, let's say that a program has been going on for 2 years already. How many grant applications don't include, say, the number of programs that have been held as part of an initiative, or how many audience members have attended, or like some of the really, really, really basic, just keeping those numbers to track a program and its evolution and all those good things, which to me doesn't sound as much as drudgery as it is really just you want to be able to brag about your successes. But if you just say we've held a lot of events, that's one thing. But if you're able to say we've held 17 events and just sort of collecting that really basic stuff. The second thing I would say is that has to do with community data. And someone will say our community is a low-income community, or our community is this or that. And, it's sort of the journalist asking a question, which is who says? And so meaning that any data that's external to yourself, to your organization, that helps verify your assumption or assertion about your community is really, really helpful to have. So it's really, so from our standpoint, when we see a grant application that includes any external data that helps paint a picture of the context you're working in, that's really, really.
I want to add one other thing, and Bobby mentioned it in the chat, is impact. So how were your audiences, your community, your stakeholders, however you call them, how are they different because of interacting with you? And so figuring out a way to ask good questions around that impact piece. And that might be a survey question, that might be really quick interviews with people going, coming or leaving. That might be a really formalized process to understand impact, especially if it's a new endeavor that you're moving forward with. But impact, I think, is really important as well.
Can I make a quick comment? Thanks. I thought Bobby made an excellent point in the chat earlier about the potential value of the UN Sustainable Development Goals as standards standards against which to measure impact and progress and so on. And I think that's a really great point. I would just add one word of caution, which is that in my experience, certain communities tend to be somewhat suspicious of the United Nations and anything associated with it. So it might not be a bad idea just to kind of use your own discretion and ask yourself, might some of our stakeholders see that as a red flag, if we were to cite the United Nations in any of our data or any surveys, et cetera. I'm sure that that's very much the exception rather than the rule, but that is sometimes the case. So I just thought I would mention it.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. I think that before we head into breakouts, just, your communities, and there are tons of resources. Is it, if you're a museum, what other data is out there around museums in Illinois? So think about the kind of milieu you exist in, and then what is the external data that makes most sense to help think about the work that you're producing. So I encourage you, as as this percolates and some of this sinks in and you have a chance to look at the slides again, reach out. There is an opportunity to sign up for coaching after this. That is limited if you want to go deeper. But now you get to apply what you've learned. So we are going to go into activating your knowledge. So you will be divided up into groups. You will have a Illinois Humanities staff member in your groups with you, just as a note taker. So don't ask them to give you all the answers. But they're there to just facilitate some of the documents and take notes of the discussion so you all can really focus on talking it through. These are the 4 questions. You will see those questions again in your breakout groups. And half of you, or half of the groups anyway, will have an event that was invented that you're going to put on with some details about that event, and you will be asking questions about what data should you collect, why should you collect that data, what tools are best used, and what kind of visualizations can be applied for the usage of that data. And then the other half of you will have an example 2-pager from an arts organization in the state, and you will be asking the questions in reverse. What data do you think they collected? Why did they collect that particular data? What tools were used and why? And then why did they use the data visualizations that they used? You will have 20 minutes in your groups, and then we'll come back and we'll talk about it. And that will be the end of our workshop for the most part. So, Brooklyn will be dividing you all into groups. Jen and I will be swimming around a little bit, making sure that there's no fires that need to be.
For the next 20 minutes, we're just going to do a quick share out. Each group is going to get 3 minutes to share out. And as Anna said, this time refrain is not to limit people's ability to speak. It's to give everyone an opportunity. And so I request that people respect that time stamp. Anna is going to put in the chat when you have 30 seconds left. And if you need a light nudge, I will also mention it during the meeting. So for this share out, we just wanted to ask the question of what's the question that provoked the most discussion in your group and why? Because we have access to your notes, we won't ask you to necessarily go through each of the notes, but we just wanted to see and highlight. And we'll go in room order. And if you don't remember what room you were in, no worries. I can read out who was in each room, I think. Yeah, I can do that. So that'll hopefully give you a chance to choose, or if you haven't already chosen, who the speaker is. I just wanted to do a shout out to all the Illinois Humanities staff who took wonderful notes. And also request that you are not the main speaker one more time, so that it gives an opportunity for those attending a chance to speak. So room 1 was Art Space 304, Dawn, Michaela, and Pat, as well as Matt Meacham as the note taker. So if anybody in room 1 wants to speak out on what was the question that provoked the most discussion and why. I see all of you looking at each other. Okay.
Exactly. Chime in, guys. It doesn't have to be a single. I think my experience was that the why was why did they collect this data? There was so much data. It was kind of an overwhelming amount at some point. It was that was really one of the things that we talked about the most, I would say. What do you guys think? And a lot of it had to do with like who is their intended audience, what purpose does it serve, and we're all of us from the nonprofit world, we're pretty clear this is going to be a funding opportunity and a way to garner support from whether it's civic or funders or people continuing to join them, etc. Somebody else chime in, please.
I felt that the why could be because that's maybe they don't keep separate records of every single thing, but every year there's so much that goes on in an arts organization through their educational outreach, their artist community things, that this graphic to me and this newsletter or funding piece, however you want to relate to it, is a way to capture what they've done in the past year and keep it that way.
I don't think, Don, I see you talking, but you're muted.
It's Pat.
Sorry.
Did
Sorry
you guys
about
hear me?
There you
Did you
go.
guys hear? Okay.
Yeah, so basically in their mission statement, they're building community through the arts. And so you have to be able to show the public, how well you're doing. And so it's an accountability theme as well. I'm proving that we're doing an excellent job, and this is how we're doing it. We've added there are so many artists, and we've impacted this area here. We want to show ongoing continuous improvement. So therefore we want you all to react to what we're doing. And so I think all the statements that mentioned before and what I'm talking about impacts an organization, but more importantly, it impacts the community. So yeah.
That's it.
Great, thank you. We heard some really good keywords there about questioning purpose and understanding reasons for the certain data points and accountability that may or may not have been part of the reasoning. So thank you for that. I think there was, I think we hit time of 3 minutes. Okay, perfect. So you guys were a wonderful example of how to do this. And future groups, please look to group 1 to see how we can make it a collective experience, but also answer the question in a way that, keeps the conversation open. This is not, there is no wrong or right answer here. And Anna, thank you for showing what the prompt was, because not every group got to see it, and we'll do the same for group 2, since not everybody got to see that prompt either. So group 2 includes Chris Filillo, Katie, Ty, and Mark was the moderator of that group. And so
I'm your spokesperson. I'm Katie Tricoli with Here and Again Inc. in Ottawa, Illinois. And I would say that our first question, or our second question, was why should data be collected, was our most discussed. And the biggest thing was it affordable for you? And would you recommend it to a friend or someone else to come? Would you come back to our event?
thank you, Katie. First, I'm glad you are ready to speak. And I think you bring up really good points about, the financial impact, the outreach, and the repeat audiences. I think all the questions you asked are really important, especially with that prompt. Anna and we talked a lot about what to include and what not to include. So thank you for catching some of the things.
Yeah, the thing that really struck me about the conversation was the different ways you could collect data. And one in particular, which I thought was just never occurred to me, but I thought really resonated, was having a live representative asking a 1-minute 5-question survey on site, which not only gets you data, but it also connects your audience to a representative of your organization in a face-to-face way. That sounds really brilliant.
Thank you to my friend Deanna who had that happen. We also liked the photo documentary or visual observation, taking a picture of the audience, being able to count the numbers.
Yeah, and I also want to give this is totally personal, but Fedus did send me a picture of Chris Filillo performing, which even that represented so much. And an image or a recording can say so much. And so, that might seem complicated, but it's something that we all can do to represent and document all the great work everyone's doing. Okay, should we move on to group 3? Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. So group 3, we have Carol, Joey, and Tia, moderated by Fedus. And this was about the annual report as well.
Okay, hi, it's Joey. I'm gonna kind of give a readout. We had the same as what group one had, which was the snapshot of the organization. So, obviously we felt that was a kind of a here and now observation of what was going on. But, looking through the numbers, they looked really impressive. But then when we started drilling down, it started to bring out more questions than, providing us a sense of what's going on. First of all, tools used, obviously the financial reports, Google Analytics, things from Meta Insights, wherever they gathered it from, information about programs. So we had some nice hard numbers, but we didn't get a sense of how has this changed? Is this a growth in the organization? So again, we didn't get that kind of context of, is this a growing organization from the previous year from the data presented? And then visually, it was kind of limited on the data page. There was a lot of numbers. We had that one image in there of the event, but there was no caption with it. So we couldn't really tell what that was supposed to represent. And then representing, for example, information in relation to the events, it, gave us the number of hours and the different types of programs. But again, it brought up the question of, well, what percentage of those hours were from each of those programs? So maybe a different way to represent just a straight out number of, here's the programs, here's the hours. So kind of mixing, I think we felt there was a lot of visualization that could have enhanced some of the representation there. And then we also felt that including the testimonials, again, brings a different kind of a spin to what is being said, like how people are actually, had gotten an advantage, or how the organization may have provided an improvement for them. Did I hit all that right, Carol?
I'm not sure if Carol can unmute, but thank you so much for taking it.
Yeah, I'm here.
Too. Oh, there's Carol.
Yes, I agree with everything that Joey said.
Perfect. Yeah, context. I think especially tying back to what Anna was walking us through about the applying data and the importance of the data. Joey, your group really caught some important factors that may have helped enhance. And we don't know the purpose of the annual report, so maybe that was their goal. However, if this was your organization, I think it's important to keep in mind that those are really helpful things to include. Thank you. We have two more groups now, one for each of the prompts. So the next prompt will be events and the next will be annual. But room 4 is Anne, Jasmine, Mario, and Mary, facilitated by Zerlene. So I think Jasmine is already unmuted and ready to go.
Yes. So the data that, well, what data should be collected, the age of participants, who is our target audience, and also the number of attendees. Did we choose a great location, the accessibility, and also is it a diverse audience, and pictures as well. Number 2 is, why should this data be collected for new funders and to see how we can improve for our next event. Number 3, what tools will you need to collect the data? Why these tools? So flyers for our outreach, digital media, QR codes for demographics, surveys and questionnaires, and educational activities. And 4, what kind of visualization could be used and why? So the QR codes for when you first come in, sign in, to do general information, and also pictures. And anyone else from group 4 would like to chime in? Go ahead.
Yeah, this is Mario. One of the things that we wanted to use the QR codes is for easy to use and collect data from the event goers. And then just use those for demographics and for reporting, and also to put in, like any donations if they wanted to do any donations to the event. right? And that's also important for us to report to the funders. So that data, and that's why we wanted to report that.
Thank you both. Yeah, I think the way you guys just talked about too, of like the variety of tools that align with the event and the goals of the event, and to both your points, the accessibility and the ease, focusing on the audience experience, I think is a really good, important thing to consider when planning events. And I think I saw Anna perk up with this too, about like goals for how to improve for next events and like applying the learnings for future ones too. This is it, even if it's a one-off thing, you know, there's always learnings that come from those. And so thank you for bringing those to our attention. And last but not least, the final group that looked at the annual report is Allison, Claire, and Heather, facilitated by Bobby. So whoever from that group wants to speak up, you're the last ones, so no pressure.
All right, I'll go first. Don't know, Allison disappeared again. Oh, there she is. So we had a lot of the same critiques. We might not have been as kind as the other groups were, but but we did have a lot of the same critiques. Really, our biggest question was, who was this set of data for? Because it seemed to be for, and this is not a term we use, but it's a term my friend used with me the other day, the inside baseball. There are a lot of things like Launchpad. I don't know what that was, although it seemed to be rentals. I said some of that data would be things that I only would use internally or give to my board as a launching up. For example, a lot of the social media, I don't know that that's meaningful unless you're writing some kind of grant for social media impact. That it was more of an internal judge of where things, how you might be reaching your public. And then without any explanation, not sure, you know, someone may be wondering what the purpose of that is. They seem to be trying to convey community impact, but clearly it was a front back thing, and the second page had the impactful statements. So with the storytelling that they've gained from either interviews or surveys. So it was just a lot. Anyone else want to add? All right.
Thank you. Yeah, I think Heather, I think by inside baseball, you mean like the terminology used, right? Yeah, okay. Sorry, I just wanted to make sure I'm understanding that. Yeah, I think one of the things to keep in mind is, yeah, Anna found this, or we found this on like a public platform. So to your point, that means it was for public knowledge. And so, yeah, I think to what Matt said, to what Bobby said, Anna said at the an earlier point about knowing your audience. And that doesn't just mean like using the right tools for that, but the right terminology. So not to pat ourselves on the back, but you know, Anna and I, when we did our surveys of like, how familiar are you with this? And then using that data to inform how deep we go into terminology. Like, you know, if you're ever not sure about what terminology to use, you can easily ask as well. So thank you so much for like all of the criticism and the critique and the skepticism you put into this, because I think that helps us realize not only the good to represent or reflect and repeat, but also kind of the learnings from it of what not to do or how to do better. So thank you. So that wraps up our 5 wonderful groups. And to Anna, what Anna mentioned earlier as a mandatory, which you're right, I agree, it is mandatory, because as we talked about, data is important and we're all here because we respect it and understand it. And so we do have an exit survey for you to all fill out. Anna has shared that in the chat. So please go in and fill it out. We do have an update from Illinois Humanities after this, so please feel free to come back and let us know when you're done with that survey. I think we have, I'm gonna hand this back off to, okay, we have 5 minutes to fill out the survey. So Oh, yeah. Fun images and colors is not always, it looks good, but it's not best practice. So yeah, you have 5 minutes to fill out the form, so please fill that out. If you have any questions, reach out to me or Anna, but don't leave this group yet because Illinois Humanities will have updates.